So hi guys, I'm Mayo. Lawyers are nasty people, and you should see them and meet them as little as possible while scaling your global business. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Sparring, a legal company basically supporting digital entrepreneurs in their global scaling. And throughout our experiences, we identified 5 easy steps for you to basically, when building your product or scaling your business, how to avoid lawyers as much as possible. So I'm more than happy to guide you through those in today's presentation. So this is a short outline, and we'll go step by step from the early stages of your business until the really scaling of your team. So first of all is a corporate setup. Well, very often, most of the projects start as a Friday night project or side project next to your work. You start in the garage and with a bunch of your friends, and you build something, right? And actually, you don't need any legal presence nor corporate setup, and that's fairly correct. However, once you are seeking an investment, or you would like to actually issue an invoice for your first client, then a corporate setup is something you should really need in order to be at least somehow protected. Now, when dealing with corporate setups, there are a number of options you have. So first of all, the country. Now, the country is really important because the different country it is, the different laws actually apply there, not even the laws corporate, but also in terms of taxation, in terms of IP, etc., etc. Therefore, you should be cautious. Well, so when it comes to a country, first of all is the CEE region, so Central Eastern Europe. Now, this is surprisingly a region where actually it's okay to set up your legal presence. First of all, because actually the taxation, when it comes to that, is rather convenient. It provides you a bunch of pro-startup legislations, enabling you to provide all the important stuff like the investment rounds, convertible loans, employee share schemes, different share classes, etc. The stuff we are going to talk a bit later. So basically, it's actually really very flexible. The drawbacks are a number of those. First of all, the English language within the local authorities might not be actually their strength. And also what's other issue is that if you're seeking a foreign investment coming from either Western Europe or from Asia or from Northern America, then such investors might be rather uneasy when it comes to the investing of these entities. Secondly, there is the Western Europe and USA. Well, this is interesting because these entities are actually the really, if you set up your corporate presence over there, very often they also face rather good taxation. But then when it comes to the trust of your investors, they love it, especially when it comes to the US and you establish a company in Delaware or in the UK before Brexit. Then actually this might be a good choice. Also, to set up an entity in the UK costs you like 14 euros and takes like 2 days. So it's very quick, very fast. You can do it without lawyers. So basically the infrastructure works that you don't need to see any lawyer. You just go to the website service and basically within a few hours, few days, you are all set and good to go to issue your first invoice or actually receive your investment or sign the term sheet. So this is really cool. When it comes to the offshore, well, there are 2 types of offshores. Surprisingly, there are European offshores, such as Estonia, Malta, Cyprus, and others, Luxembourg. These companies are basically more expensive to maintain, so you would need at least a couple of thousands, if not dozens of thousands of euros to basically sustain such entities. You need to travel there, etc. So basically, this is something that is not very recommended, especially for the trustworthy startup. Now, when it comes to the well, this is the country. Now, when it comes to the basic forms across the world, well, at the beginning, it's easy. Either you are a freelancer and you are a bunch of freelancers with your team, or you are a corporation. Now, when it comes to a freelancer, there are a number of problems with that. It's, well, and benefits, of course. The benefit is it's easy. You don't need to have like serious accountant. You don't really need to file complex paperwork. But then the drawback is that if the things go wrong, you actually are liable with your own property. which is kind of tough if you own the house or you have a family and a kids. Now, having a unlimited liability as a freelancer might be something you should really be aware of. Therefore, to create a other type of corporate setup actually and being the business entity, either limited liability company or joint stock company or whatever, makes it much easier for you to sleep well at night, have a stable business, and be actually limited for the losses of your company. So this is something, but of course the drawback is that when it comes to the business entities, then it's more important. I mean, it's harder to sustain those. You need to discuss your sometimes lawyers, sometimes your accountant, sometimes your tax advisor. So it takes more energy, but then it provides you with more safety. And of course, when you would like to raise money, then you definitely need to go for this one. Okay, so if you do have a corporate presence, now we come to the more important and more interesting stuff from my side, is the founders' relationships. Very often, when you start your business in the garage as a bunch of developers, that's okay. But then if you like to scale it, you need sales, for instance, very often. Or if it's a B2C product, you need somebody who's good at marketing. And for that, either you pay those people, which usually don't have money for, and therefore you invite them as your co-founders, as the people that actually founded the company with you. Now, usually these people are coming from your close circle of friends. And this is the problem of most of the businesses we've seen, that when it comes to the founders, if they are friends, they actually say, oh, okay, we don't need an agreement. We are okay, we're just friends. We have a napkin agreement within ourselves. You have 50, I have 50, that's okay. But the problem is if there is attraction. When the money comes in, either investment money or the first clients, then the problems actually usually emerge because people remember things differently. People actually understand that, okay, they do have different expectations, and this is actually an ideal place for the disputes and for the lawyers come in. Therefore, in order to prevent those disputes, it's good for you to have at least simple shareholders agreement. Now, having the shareholders agreement is not just the risk avoidance mechanism, it then also provide a support to your own business if we go through the number of clauses written below. So when it comes to the vesting, imagine a situation, you found your company with your friend, and you split it 50-50. And after half a year, the friend actually gets a work in Google, and he says, well, actually, I'll go to Zurich. And, but he owns the 50% of your company. Now, there is no legal way for you to actually get those 50% back and distribute it to the other co-founder, substituting the former one. And in order for that, there is a good mechanism for vesting. Now, the vesting is a period through which you can have the particular equity, but in order to sustain it throughout the whole of your lifetime, you need to stay in the company and work for it for a, I don't know, period of 3 or 4 years. If you leave before or throughout the vesting period, you lose the equity. Now, this is very harsh. We can make it more sophisticated. We can say, okay, so the vesting period is not one bunch, one big block, but we can divide it to the particular cliffs. For instance, 1-year cliffs. So if I leave after first year of the vesting period, and the vesting period has like 3 years, then I will able to keep at least 1/3 of the equity that was actually afforded. Now, not only the and the ultimate purpose of the vesting period is, first of all, it protects the equity for the founders staying in the company, but also it motivates the founders to actually keep going even if the things are not very good. Especially when it comes to the startups and scale-ups, the things are often not very good looking, and therefore such vesting mechanism can actually incentivize them to really stay and work hard even throughout the hard times. When it comes to the founders leaving clause, I've seen a number of startups who made it to the hundreds of people and millions of revenues. But there were times that there were like only 10 or 15 people, and each one of the founders was crucial. Either it was a head of sales, or head of product, or it was CTO, or it was a chief marketing officer. Now, these people are inevitable for your business. If any one of them leaves on the short notice, your business would be severely detrimented. And for that, you can actually establish in this shareholders agreement additional founders leaving clauses, saying that if you leave the company, you will, for instance, need to return all of the, even the vested shares. Or, for instance, you are basically obliged to at least leave on the 6 months notice, and within this notice, you are forced to, or obliged to, basically train a new person on your estate to provide a decent knowledge transfer so that the company would not be detrimented at all. When it comes to the dilution of angels, it's very important for your business to build up your first MVP or the demo so that you can really make a proof of concept and be able to raise serious money. Usually you need some angel investment. Now, the angel investors are reluctant to invest into some spreadsheet and maybe a few slides on the PowerPoint. And therefore, in the shareholders agreement, you can stimulate the angels that, if new investors are coming to your company, the older and former shareholders are diluting themselves. What you can do, we can say, well, if you become an angel, if you really invested the company the real money, supporting our product, you can dilute slower than the others. So even such basically agreement or establishment can actually motivate the very first investor to your product to really come in because of the favorable terms. Secondly, also, the shareholders agreement is also good for the ones that have not that much of the equity, only a few persons, usually your employees or the first employees, and actually you can provide a security mechanisms that can protect them as the minority shareholders, which is good because if I'm having 1% within your company, well, actually I cannot really influence much, right? And basically you can decide what's happening with the company. But if there is a good mechanism, for instance, saying that if the founders are exiting the company, I can do a tag along, right? Utilize my tag along right and basically attach myself to the exit and will be paid a fair price, the right one and the same one as in the proportional way as the founders, for instance. Last but not least, sometimes the company comes to a deadlock situation where basically you want, for instance, and invite a strategic investor, and you will lose the majority of the votes. And now there is a disagreement between the shareholders whether we should do this or not. And then you can invoke the mechanism called shootout, or called Russian roulette, where basically, in the end of the day, part of the shareholders will buy out the other part of the shareholders for the particular price. And it's rather complex, but the thing is that if you have a good shareholders agreement, even without lawyers, you can basically overcome the issues and disagreements you can have within your particular team, either in relation to the other investors or co-founders, or basically your employees. Other parts, well, very often what's happening is that the co-founders divide their voting rights, right? But the thing is, especially the startups are scaling very quickly. Number of startups have at least 2, 3, very often even 4 iterations of investment rounds. With every single investment round, the shareholders are diluting. And basically, when you are distributing and deciding how many shares you should have, you should really think in advance so you would know that, okay, even after 2 investment rounds, I will have enough shares to actually steer the company and not be basically forced to discuss and agree with each one of the particular investors. So actually, shareholders agreement, good thing, few sheets of paper, but basically can provide a lot of support to your team and avoid many disputes. Intellectual property. Most of the digital business, most of it basically sells IP, intellectual property. It's basically the very vital product that digital people create for their clients, either B2B or B2C. And it's very important to basically be able to protect it and actually even transfer it to the clients. So very often, in general, there are 3 basic rights of intellectual property. The first one is a copyright. Now, the copyright is basically something very convenient because there is no registration needed. It costs you nothing. It lasts for many years, depending on the country, but somewhere between 50 or 70 years after the death of the particular author. So it's a very strong mechanism. But the point is, usually the copyright needs to be basically protected and basically transferred by the particular contract. So if you are just having a bunch of friends working for you without any contracts, and then you try to sell something to your client, or basically to your client, then actually you are selling nothing. There is a shell which is filled with just air. For the shell to be really filled with the IP, you need the contracts from the all natural persons, your friends and actually employees working for you, transferring their IP to you, usually the source code, or the designs, or documentation, whatever. And basically, from that moment, you can compile it and sell it at once. So basically, it's very good. The copyright is very widely used mechanism, but don't forget the contracts for that are well stated. Secondly, the trademark. Trademark is good. You don't need two lawyers for it either. Usually, especially within the European Union, you can file for a few €100 on your own the European trademark. It lasts for 6 months, but it's rather very easy. It's very user-friendly. The website is really has good UX, good UI, and basically through that you can acquire a trademark covering you in every single European country, your business. It's very important for the B2B, but the more important for the B2C businesses. You should not forget that either, especially once you have already a good traction. It's not necessary for the early stages of your company, but once you have a good traction, it's important, especially it increases your valuation in the eyes of the particular investors. Patents, this is a hard stuff. You need lawyers for that, but very few digital companies actually need it. So usually it's regulated either, it's needed mostly for the hardware. So we'll go through that. Then we have employee share schemes. Employee share scheme is important because if you have a company, you have good relationships with your founders, you retain your IP, then you need your employees. Now, if your startup is to be successful, you actually need the best employees working for you. Now, the best employees are expensive. As a startup, you don't have that much money. So the easiest way for you actually to really stimulate and motivate the new people coming to work for you is basically through distribution of employee shares. Now, there are a number of formats how we can do that, but there are basically 4 of those. At the very beginning, while you're in the garage, the only thing you need is a trust me spreadsheet. Basically, simple spreadsheet with a name and the equity distributed to your people. I mean, it works well. It's basically gentleman's agreement. You don't need actually any lawyer for that. And it works pretty well. It can stimulate the people, and we've seen it in a number of companies at the very early stages that this is a widely used mechanism that actually works. But of course, once the company gets bigger, the stakes are higher, the valuation rises, then of course it should go a bit more serious. So in the second layer, you can do the contractual shareholders agreement. So basically, at least there will be some agreement with the notarized signatures of the particular people saying, yes, you own this, yes, you own that. That's a bit more significant, more certainty is added to the particular relationship. But of course, if the company raises Series A or Series B, then actually the options or the real shares might come to the question. Of course, the drawback is that it's more difficult to actually register them. It's a bit more costly to sustain such corporate structure, and you should probably need some lawyers for that, but it's only in the later stages of your startup. So for the first few years, you're okay with the Trust Me spreadsheet or the contractual SHA. Last, but so if you already have a employment, then there are 3 very easy models. I'll just run through them, and basically this will be done with the law for today for you. So first of all, there is an employment contract. In every single country, there is a labor contract basically covering the whole relationship. The good thing about the employment contract is usually, by way of legislation, all IP from your employees and laborers is automatically transferred to the mother company, which is great because then you do not need to really discuss the lawyers, anything. Usually, by way of the legislation, all IP is transferred to you, so you are safe and sound. Unfortunately, the taxation is usually a bit more higher than when it comes to the other 2 options, so it's always a decision-making process where you would like to invest or not. Secondly, it's a freelancing. That's very common. It's usually, especially in the IT sector, the only problem is the liability I've already mentioned. but then it's very cheap to sustain this. And as a company having a freelancers, you should really take a good care about the IP transfer mechanism so that you will retain the IP of the particular freelancers, because then you might end up in the troubles. Having your freelancing suing your company for the IP you use but you don't own. Lastly, there is a B2B relationship, so sometimes the freelancers work through their small limited liability companies, and this is pretty much the same. The benefit is that basically these people are protected, their property is protected because it's limited, but then you as a company should take a double care when it comes to the IP. Okay, guys, so these were the 5 easy steps, how you should avoid nasty lawyers as much as possible throughout the scaling of your global business. I'll be around after the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you very much.